Hey, what's up everyone? Hope you've been doing good. Today I have a really simple setup, but it should be kind of a fun video. I want to talk about the Bunnyhop and try to demystify some of the mechanics that go on with the Bunnyhop. A lot of times on the online comments or in forums, you'll hear heated debate around this term of scooping and whether or not you scoop to lift the rear wheel up. You'll also hear a lot of people say that you shouldn't learn how to do a rear wheel lift or that it's unnecessary. And I wanted to try to kind of weigh in on that a little bit. Recently, I feel like there's been a little bit more of a mindset shift with coaching in mountain bikes where people will say there's one right way to do this skill, like you need to hit a drop like this or wheelie like this or bunny hop like this. And to be honest with you, after being a pro mountain biker for a decade, it's all about situational awareness and understanding what your goal is at that time. There's been plenty of times coming down a high-speed fire road where maybe there's a water bar or just the trail dips away for a second, and I'll just do a light two-wheel lift to just get my wheels in the air and get across that gap. And then there's also other times where I'm trying to get up like a 30-inch tall ledge, and that employs a completely different mechanic. So with that being said, I just wanted to touch on a few different things I see pop up all the time. I was hoping by busting out the Garage Bunny, we could kind of stop along the way of the Bunnyhop and talk about different things that are happening. So first thing you might notice is I have this weird green thing here. This is a little device from Tilt, which is another manual trainer company, and it allows the chainring to move, just similar to if you had no chain, but it keeps everything kind of together so you don't have to take your chain off each time. The very first thing that you have to do when doing a bunny hop is you have to get the front wheel off the ground. So how do you do that? One thing you definitely do not do is you do not pull the front wheel up like that. So it's not a pulling motion. You're not lifting like this at all. So no muscle man. This is muscle man. I see people do that all the time. If it sounds like that when you bunny hop, it's probably because you're doing muscle man hop. So again, one more muscle man hop. That's usually from people pulling up and then they're kind of doing the reverse row forward to get the bike to come up a little bit. So if your goal is to get both wheels off the ground, you can do a muscle man hop and you can do it. However, you're gonna use a lot more energy and you're gonna be very limited in your height because you can't really get the front wheel up high enough to do the reverse row and get the bike to come up. If you're going to just try to get off the ground and you wanna do it in a very minimal or kind of efficient way, what I do a lot of times is just a little bunny hop with two wheels at the same time. And the way to do this is you're gonna be in neutral riding position. A good way to find if you're in a neutral position is to be in your riding stance and take your hands off. You don't want to be too far forward or too far back. So neutral position, spring down, spring up. But wait, my feet came off the pedals. Why did that happen? That's because I'm not creating pedal pressure. So this is where the whole idea of the scoop comes in. No, I am not scooping the bike to lift the rear wheel. What I am doing though, is I'm creating a little bit of pedal pressure to help lift the bike up. So that's where there's kind of this misconception of the scoop. It's not that I am literally lifting the bike up with my rear wheel. That is not what's happening. However, if I keep my feet flat and I go like this, bike does not go anywhere. Now, if I point my toe, create a little pedal pressure, almost push on the bars a little bit forward, so create a little bit of tension there. Now, that's the only difference. So I think for a lot of the people that are kind of more engineering minded, when they hear the term scoop, they're literally thinking like an excavator coming and lifting the rear wheel off the ground. That's not what's happening. I think what people are trying to describe is that you're going to dip your back toes, you're gonna create pedal pressure, you're going to kind of create a little bit of tension in the handlebar, and that movement there is what allows you to lift the rear wheel, if that makes sense. So again, no tip down. Now if I tip my toe, so you can see the crank arm trying to come with me. That's kind of what I think people are getting misunderstood on. And when you do a big bunny hop, there is a point where you lift the front wheel up, the front wheel is rising, rising, rising. You start to spring, which will get the rear wheel to come up off the ground. And as the rear wheel is coming up off the ground, you're gonna be front wheel high, rear wheel low. And then you'll do a reverse row. You'll start to level out the bike. And as you do that, you're also pushing the bars as you're creating tension here. So you can see my calf is no tension. I'm pushing the bars, pushing, creating tension, pulling with my hamstring a little bit, and lifting the rear. And that is like the mystical scoop. Even though it's not a scoop, it's more of a cross tension thing happening. So that is why I personally am a fan of people learning how to do a rear wheel lift, only because it's not gonna hurt them. I do understand if they're thinking that they need to lift the front and it's kind of this mechanical thing where it's lift front, once front is lifted, now scoop rear. That's not what's happening. What's really happening is lift front, explode through your hips, bike comes off the ground. As the bike's coming off the ground, you reverse row, you start to level the bike out. Most of that is being done with your arms, like 90+%. And you'll also see a lot of people when they do those bunny hops, they'll get a little bit of like calf striation if they have defined calf. And that's because they're pushing into the pedal and just pulling slightly. So that's why I hear a lot of people too that say that they're having trouble like on a drop with their feet flying off as they go off of a drop. I think a lot of times what's happening there is that as they come up to the end of the drop, when they have poor technique or maybe just different technique than they need at the moment, what they'll do is they'll go like this and then they'll jump and their feet fly off. However, if they were to, and this is not my preferred technique for drops by any means, but if they were to go like this and point the toe, create a little bit of cross tension, then bike would come with them. So you're not scooping the rear wheel up, but you are creating a little bit of cross tension. You don't need to, you do not need to, but many people will. And that's where I think when people have clips or they ride with clip pedals for a long time, they do not need to generate that cross tension. And when they're kind of doing this, so when they're leveling their bike out, as they pull their feet up, if you were to watch their foot, it would come slightly off of the pedal until the cleat engaged, and then it would pull the bike up slightly with their feet. When you have flat pedals, you have to be a lot more mindful of pointing that toe slightly. So if I go like this, nothing's happening. However, if I point my toe, and that's just a few pounds to help lift the rear as I'm doing the reverse row forward. That's one of those things where I think a lot of people online, especially comments and forums, if they haven't themselves done a really high bunny hop, then maybe they haven't gotten to the point where you're really eking every single inch out and you're basically going as high as you can and scooping up and getting as tight as you possibly can. And that's where you need to use that muscle the most, and that's where you'll see it the most. However, you can probably do a solid 10 to 13 inch bunny hop without needing to engage that rearward tension much at all. On a bunny hop where you're not trying to go like this and pull the bike up, if you just wanted to bunny hop and get your leg to there, you don't really need that reverse tension. So here is another example with just lift and then forward. So like that, I didn't use the cross tension at all. All I did was kind of rock back, get the front wheel up, and then do that forward row. So I can do a bunny hop that high without doing that kind of tension trick. However, to get really high, I need to use that tension trick, and that's where this stops me, because what ends up happening, 3, 2, 1. Oh, so see right when I'm trying to go like that, I'm locking out the machine. That's why it stopped me right there that time. So I'm gonna do another example. I'm gonna take it off and I'm gonna try to do a stationary bunny hop, and then hopefully you can kind of see what I'm talking about now. So with that being said, I do want to do one last thing, which is kind of talk about what this position feels like when you're getting a pretty high one. So I'm gonna grab a couple blocks and stack them under the front wheel. All right, so with these blocks underneath, this is gonna be probably around a 13 to 15 inch bunny hop height. So if I were to kind of do that reverse row and level out, what I want to talk about really quickly is the feeling of being here and kind of what the launch point is. So again, this is really scary for a lot of people. This is why this is kind of nice to kind of get an idea of just the feeling here. And then to get the ultimate height, you do launch, forward row, and slight tension and pull there. So I hope that makes sense. So I just waited, my wheels coming up, boom, boom. So that's kind of my launch point, is here and then, So I hope that makes sense for people that are struggling a little bit. And I know that guys like Jeff Kendallweed, they've done videos where they put plywood pedals on with no traction pins. I'd be really curious for someone to do a video with those wooden pedals and really define calves and see if when they do that, you have the activation of the hamstring and the calf where they're creating a little bit of tension and kind of lifting a few pounds off the rear end. While I don't think it's necessary to learn how to do a rear wheel lift, I do think that that motion is very similar to when you're doing a really high bunny hop and you're getting that ultimate kind of boom, boom, almost like an ollie where the board goes up and then back. So I know this wasn't like a crazy in-depth video, but I just wanted to touch on a few things that I've been thinking about lately. And if anyone has any rebuttals or if they can kind of add more into the comments, I would absolutely love to hear it. I am not being protective over the technique or anything in that regard. I just personally feel like it's never bad to learn more skills. I do realize when you're learning something new, you have kind of limited space for processing information. So focusing on the task at hand is really key. However, telling someone to learn how to do a little bit of a rear wheel lift and understand that cross tension thing, I don't think that that's gonna hurt them when they're trying to learn how to bunny hop. I think the biggest mistake that I see all the time is people trying to do kind of the muscle man hop where they pull up instead of getting into that nice manual position. And that's the biggest thing where I think like a garage bunny or some sort of device like that can actually help, where you're learning how to get into that position, get over the fear, and then be able to launch from that position if you want to get a higher bunny hop. I think there's a channel called MTB Drop-In. They did a really great video where he's talking about how looping out and learning how to loop out and get off the back of the bike is really what unlocked bunny hops for him. And I thought that was really cool because there's a lot of coaches that say, oh, you don't need to go that far. You know, you just kind of need to get up a little bit, things like that. But a lot of people are struggling with mental blocks more than physical blocks. I think there are times where kind of overemphasizing or exaggerating the movement that's happening a bit can help people click in their brain and say, oh, I need to try to feel this. And I feel like that's where this whole scoop term has come from. I think what people are trying to describe is creating a slight amount of cross tension and pressing against the pedal so that the bike stays up with you and you can kind of lift a few of the pounds of the rear end. But what I hear a lot of other people do is they take that term completely literally, which is totally fine. But then they're saying it's impossible to scoop and lift your rear wheel while you are on it unless you were to hook your feet under the pedals and lift the bike up. And that's also true, but it is possible to create a little bit of cross tension and just help the bike up on the way. And I think that's what people are trying to say. And maybe we can all come together and like figure out a better term for it than scoop, because I agree, it's not a scoop, but there is something happening. And I think that's kind of where the magic of the bunny hop comes from. And totally disregarding it can be hard for some people. And at the very end of the day, just like almost anything else in life, you just need to get out and practice, whether it's in your garage or it's just out here on flat ground. Just practice, just do those reps and try to get over those little blockades you have, whether it's physical or mental, because it is a complex movement. That's where I do like the garage bunny as well. With the bungee cord tension, it helps you lift the rear end of the bike, where I think a lot of people have trouble with that. But I just want it to be said, there's no one way to do anything. The only way that industries and sports change and evolve is by people challenging the preconceived notions. And a good example is with motocross. People all used to jump like this. This was the normal style. And then there's a young kid that came in and started laying the bike sideways and scrubbing things. And people were upset at him at first for it. And then now it's become ubiquitous and it's used all around the world. There are coaches that are really great at their job. You should trust what they say and they'll give individual personal feedback. However, with all of the online coaching stuff, you should just take this as a kind of grain of salt, add it into your playbook of all the other things you've listened to and just see what makes the most sense to you using first principle thinking and just try to get out there and have fun. That's all that really matters. Get those wheels off the ground. You can do it. Well, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Talk to you later.